Hi, I'm Jonathan Guy Lewis, and I'm the writer and director of Soldier On, and you're watching Q&A with Lady K.
Soldier On is a play within a play, focusing on veterans and the after effects they deal with. Not only did you direct the play, but you wrote it and you actually star in it as well.
Yes.
Where did your inspiration come from for Soldier On?
So I'm a sort of veteran myself. I was sponsored through high school by the military. I had an army scholarship, so I thought destined to become a soldier. I thought I was going to be a general. I thought I was going to be running the British Army by the time I was 40. And it all went horribly wrong because I was invalided out as soon as I got to Sandhurst. And that's the officer training college in the UK. And I had this real dilemma. I was sort of what they call binned. You know, they very unceremoniously tell you, that's it, you're out. And as I lay in my military hospital bed, thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was only 22. The only two things I was really good at school were, we call it the CCF. It's ROTC, or it's where you dress up as a soldier and you play war games, basically. And the school play. I used to love acting. And I thought, well, you know, they're quite similar, actually, sort of dressing up in a costume and shouting at people. So I thought I'd audition for drama school. So I went from the military to the kind of world of theatre acting. And when I graduated from acting school, I did a lot of theatre, but my first big TV job was a series called Soldier. And it had big viewing figures. It was a big show in the kind of mid-90s. And that was weird. So having thought I was going to be a soldier, to suddenly be playing a soldier. And I did that for 2 years, 2 series of that. And I wrote a play about being invalided out, called Our Boys, and it gets done quite a lot. So I think I sort of became a bit of a go-to person if you want anyone military or write anything military. So it sort of followed me around a little bit. And a lot of the kind of roles I've played, so London's Burning, I played the governor of the firemen, you know, the boss. And in Soldier, I was the sergeant, the platoon sergeant. So my kind of casting bracket was the kind of tough but fair, you know, boss. And so I think I have a passion for mental health and also for veterans. And the Soldier On itself came out of a commission in 2015 to write a play for the wider military community of Plymouth, which is in the southwest of England. And I went down to spend a summer with some great people down there. And I interviewed lots of veterans and serving personnel and wives and children. And I got a really comprehensive picture of what it's like at the moment, a bit of a snapshot of where we are with the military. So we made a play called Boots at the Door. And I had a very big cast, and it was great. But I got back to London, and the play that I felt that I really wanted to write, actually, in hindsight, was a play about me going to make a play with all these people. I learned so much, and so I sat down, and for about 3 months, I just put down all my experiences that I'd had with these amazing people. And it became the bare bones of Soldier On, which is, as you say, a play about the making of a play about the veterans. So it's sort of a bit of meta theatre, if you like. But it just seemed to work. And my inspirations were a couple of plays, actually. There was a play a few years ago called Black Watch, which toured the world, and it was all about the regiment, the Black Watch, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it was very moving. And I suppose when I saw that, I felt I wanted to do a version of Black Watch, but about coming back. And as a warrior, how do you come back? And what's it like for your family to have you back? And do you come back? And so that was on my mind. And also, one of my favorite plays is called Our Country's Good, and by Timberlake Wertenbaker. And that's about some Cockney convicts who go transported to Australia in the early 19th century, rehearsing a play called The Recruiting Officer. And their director is a British officer, army officer. It's a wonderful play about a group of people making a play who have no experience of plays. So I thought, that's interesting. So those were my two inspirations at the start of it. But it's a very long answer to your question.
That's okay. I like details. Throughout the years of research, how immersed did you become in the PTSD culture?
It was happening all around me. My play Our Boys, as I said about my experiences being invalided out, there was a guy next to me who'd been blown up in the Hyde Park bomb, and he'd been in the hospital for a year. And although his physical injuries seemed to have, he'd recovered from, when I first met him, and I thought, why is he still in the hospital? You know, he seems to be okay. And of course, within a few weeks, it became very clear that a lot of it was up here. And I became quite close to him at the time. And his character in the play Our Boys is the kind of central figure in it. Now, when I first did this play in 1993, 94, you know, it was still quite raw, I suppose. And the play was revived in the West End in the UK in 2015, actually. No, 2012. And it had a very starry UK cast. So it had Lawrence Fox, who was a well-known English actor, and Matthew Lewis, who does the Harry Potter films, and literally the week before we opened the play, the headline in the London evening paper was that this guy Joe had not only killed himself, he killed his wife and his daughter.
Oh my God.
And that really, you know, I get emotional even thinking about it now, because, you know, he carried that with him all the time. And I vowed at that point that I was going to really do something, do what I could to try and make a difference. And also, my sister committed suicide, so it's very close to me. Mm-hmm. And it's just the message. We've written an anthem at the end of the play, which we sing, and it's about, you aren't alone, you're not alone, but how do you help? How do you help people? And I felt that, you know, I know something about playwriting, and I thought I would do it with a play. And I did a lot of research into PTSD, and the ancient Greeks knew about PTSD. Obviously, they didn't call it PTSD, but the trauma of being in a battle was something that they knew a lot about. And so what would happen after they fought a battle was that the survivors would create a big fire, a bonfire, and they would stand around the fire and they would recount the battle. They would tell the stories of the battle. And it's actually why we know so much about ancient military history, because that was the way they dealt with trauma, was to share that experience, to create something that was shared. And I felt that actually stories, the value of telling stories, of sharing stories, is very important in healing, in the recovery process. Yeah. So for me, the catharsis, the recovery of the people in the show, but for an audience, is to share stories. So that for me was the kind of key thing about, you know, Soldier On, and I think why it works is that it works on a very deep level of recovery.
Was there anything you came across when you were preparing for Soldier On that really struck you? Something that you didn't know but really hit home?
I think as I'd been affected by this guy Joe, and it had been going on all this time, I think interviewing wives, girlfriends, partners, children, and, you know, hearing stories from adults who were kids with dads who'd been in Vietnam, and not really knowing what it was other than dad, you know, got violent or dad got drunk, and how it had affected them throughout the whole of their life, and just how this thing just eats away at people, and it might not present itself for years and years and years. I suppose that was the thing for me, was it's a ticking time bomb, and that if we don't do something now, the problem just gets worse and worse. So that was the big learning for me. It's not just the people who go to war. It's everyone around them that's affected by it. It's the kind of pebble in the water, the ripple effect.
Yes. If there's one lesson to be learned about dealing with PTSD, what do you hope Soldier On teaches us?
To not be ashamed of having difficult feelings. And I think, particularly in the kind of military culture, you know, you man up or grow a man suit, as they say, or you keep it in. And I think sometimes there is the issue, if I do share this, it might be career limiting. But actually, you know, it's important to know that it's okay, actually. We all need to, you know, find those moments where we can say, look, I'm feeling vulnerable. And particularly now when there's much more awareness about that. But even so, I think the culture, the military culture, is about keeping it closed in. And, you know, that's completely against what we need to do.
Yeah, we're human. We need to communicate.
Exactly. And I think you can still be a warrior, but you can still say, you know, some days I don't feel great.
Yeah,
And
or I need help.
we need help.
Yeah.
And there are things like this around to do that. And for me, the most important thing about the authenticity of the play is that when the real guys are telling the stories, maybe not their own stories, but telling someone else's story, that when other veterans are watching it, that authenticity hits home. And so they're able to tell their mates, go and see this, you know. And for me, one of the big things that, pieces of feedback I got from a veteran happened very early on when we were doing the play in London. And he'd only come to see it because a friend of a friend was in the play. And this guy never goes to the theatre. And I think he'd come really to sort of have a laugh at his friend. And we'd had a Q&A after the show. And I'd noticed him sort of hovering on the periphery, not really wanting to get involved, but curious. And after the Q&A, he came up to me and he wanted to know how I knew so much about this. So I shared my own story with him. And he said, well, look, I just want to share with you. After seeing this show, he said, I was a para, and I served in the Falklands conflict. And I saw some stuff, and I know I have PTSD. I've not really dealt with it, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm divorced. I've been divorced a few years ago now, and I know I didn't treat my ex-wife as well as I should. And he said, I've just been outside now, and I've texted her, sorry.
Wow.
And that's made me, you know, I thought, okay, if you've helped someone have a conversation, you know, that's often as good as it gets, actually. And people don't want to sit down and talk about it. But if you go and see a play, that it can spark something, you know, honey, that guy, when he said this, that's a little bit like you, or I feel that when you do that. And sometimes it can open up and be the catalyst for conversations. And that's what it's about. It's about talking rather than holding it in. And anything I can do to make that happen, really.
I really like how the cast is a combination of actors with real-life veterans. It adds a complete, unique dynamic to the play. What is the ratio between those two groups?
The ethos of the Soldiers Arts Academy, which we're trying to create this platform for the military community and veterans to engage with the performing arts, not just as therapy, but also as careers, you know, because the skill set that veterans and military have is absolutely transferable. But the ethos has always been to try and make projects half and half, so that veterans can learn from professional actors. And it's those little conversations that you can have, you know, in rehearsal, or, you know, how does that work? Or, you know, okay, so you do that. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. So you're getting that, rather than it being sort of prescribed or, you know, being lectured on, that's what you do. It's the kind of stuff being around people that you pick up on and you go, oh, I see how it's done. But equally, actors learning from veterans. So the Soldiers Arts Academy is open not just to the veteran community and serving community, but also to actors who want to work with veterans as well. So I think there's learning from both sides, and the sort of mentoring that can happen for both, and a buddying system. So we try and buddy a veteran with an actor, just to keep an eye on each other, just to make sure that when we go away or when we rehearse, because this stuff does throw up difficult things, that there is someone there checking on you, saying, you know, making sure you get home okay, and you're okay, you can talk if you want to. So the ratio is normally about, we try and make it 50-50. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky, but yeah.
For the most part, yeah, 50-50. And then what element does including ex-servicemen in the cast bring to the authenticity of the storyline?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's unique. I mean, as I said, the veterans who have become actors aren't necessarily telling their own story within the play. I've written a narrative that is a drama. It's not verbatim theatre. It's not documentary. It's a story that I've created, and I've picked on various things that I've heard in order to make that happen. But it's amazing just having veterans, because the feedback I hear from some people is, I didn't know who the veteran was and who the actor was, and that's the best compliment for both. Yeah. For an actor to get that, and also for a veteran to get that, you think, wow, we've done our job, because they seamlessly match, and I think that's very satisfying to know that.
What do you think it is about the play that resonates so well with audiences?
I think the heart of the play, really, it's all heart. It's all about, I mean, yes, I want people to go away and maybe think about life in a different way, but it's first and foremost an entertainment. Mm-hmm. So someone who saw the show said it's like the full military Monty. I remember the film, The Full Monty. It's like the full military Monty. It's funny, it's sad, it's a roller coaster of emotions, which is exactly what I think is important when you go to the theatre. Mm-hmm. That it's unexpected, that it takes you on a journey, that it throws up stuff where you kind of instinctively laugh, and then you go, oh, I don't know whether I should laugh at that. But for me, that's good theatre. It makes you ask questions, but you're entertained. I don't like theatre that hits you over the head with a message. So first and foremost, I want you to come and have a great night in the theatre, be taken on a journey, and at the end, be rooting for all the characters. And then the other stuff is there. So when I was making the play, there's a whole thing about archetype. Joseph Campbell in the 70s looked at this idea of how every society has the same characters, whether it's a very primitive society or a very advanced society. So the warrior, the teacher, the lover, the healer, they appear in every society. And because of that, every society has the same stories. And there's this idea that it's sort of in our DNA, really, so that when we see something that's archetypal, we go, that's my story. So I wanted to really create something that plugged into that, this idea that it's archetypal. These stories, they're not stereotypical, they're archetypal. The warrior coming home, not being able to connect with his wife. And you see that in ancient Greek theatre, or Ajax, the warrior who has PTSD, who ends up killing himself because he can't deal with it. So the play is littered with these metaphors and these archetypes which work on an audience in a way that's sort of under the radar. It's quite extraordinary how you see an audience getting drawn into it. And also I tried to create this idea of, in terms of, it's a very big cast, there's 16 in the cast. Right. And so meeting all the characters, as the audience meet all the characters are sort of sat in a semicircle, and the audience becomes like the 17th member of the cast. Yeah. So that, the relationship that the audience has with each of the characters as they kind of become introduced to them, and, something funny happens or something, quite dark happens, but they get drawn into all of these characters. And I think seeing an audience react to that is, it sort of works on a number of levels, because you find it funny and you laugh, and then it does boom, that's you. And I think that's how good stories work.
Finally, if you could describe Soldier On in 3 adjectives, what would they be?
Funny, passionate, moving. There you go.
I like it. I think, like I said before, everybody should see Soldier On. It's something that just really hits, I think, to everybody, and yeah, I'm speechless after sitting here listening to all your stories. I just feel like I'm lost for words. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for this amazing production.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us in Toronto. It's an amazing city. I love it. I want to move here.
Well, please do. Come join us. Soldier On is here playing in Toronto at the Berkeley Theatre until December 8th, and proceeds from ticket sales go to help military families and military men and women. So
the Roland Gossage Foundation has been amazing. Roland saw the show in London, and he's a veteran himself. And he was in, I think, a tank regiment in Canada, and he's now a very successful businessman in Toronto, but he was over in London on business. He saw the show, and he's a big guy, and at the end of the show, I hope you won't mind me saying this, but he came up to me and gave me this massive hug, and he had a little tear in his eye, and he said, I'm bringing this to Toronto. I'm going to make this happen. And here we are a year later.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. So a huge thanks to Roland for doing that.
Oh hey! Have you hit the subscribe button yet? Because I'd hate for you to miss more videos like this one.